Yes. Director Anderson.
Here.
Treasurer Goggins.
Here.
Chairman Mashefsky.
Here.
Treasurer Goggins. Treasurer Goggins.
I'm sorry. Did I miss an answer for a different one? I apologize. Here. Okay, ready? Sorry, forget.
Director Chu.
Here.
And Clerk Johnson's here.
Thank you. Madam Superintendent, do we have any agenda adjustments?
No agenda adjustments.
Thank you. Are there any announcements?
Yes, I'd like to let our community know that we do have a monthly financial report later in the meeting, and that will include a levy presentation. We also have additional levy information on our website. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we'll move into community comments. So we do have several things signed up this evening. And first up will be Coffee Monster, and who's a parent guardian within the district. And I did remind all the speakers that we're no longer asking speakers to state their home address as they begin their presentation. So,
Where do you stand?
right,
Give them my mic.
Oh, okay. And the timer's way over there. Is that the timer?
Yep, we can wait for that.
I know, but I'll start my own too because I can't see that at all. Just to make sure I'm timeline. My name is Coffee Monska, and I'm here to ask that everyone who hears this vote no on the levy. Roseville schools are failing all kids, but especially kids of color when it comes to the very basics of reading, writing, and math. For example, the 2019 MCAs, for reading, for white kids, they were 75% proficient, but black kids were only 36% proficient. For whites, for math, it was 68.9% proficient. For blacks, it was 27.2% proficient. Roseville schools are within the bottom 50% of all schools in Minnesota. I'm sick of all the signs, platitudes, and pleasantries talking about Black Lives Matter, yet there's absolutely no outrage about this. None at all. No marches, no protests. Nobody talks about it, and it's absolutely terrible. We will never have equal opportunity as a people until we can read, write, and do math and do the basics. Number two, do better with the funds you have. With the state budget that was passed in July of 2021, Minnesota schools were given a record amount of money, the most in 15 years, a 6% increase, 2.5% per student for this year, and for every year after 2% for the next number of years. Use your COVID funds better. You received almost $21 million in COVID funds. That is just for Roseville schools. $2,728 per student. Use that money. Use all this money that you spend on equity, hundreds and thousands of dollars on the Equity Alliance, equity professionals, equity training, yet we have no results. If you look at the numbers that I saw above, no results. Show me how that has benefited our students, especially our students of color, besides trying to make the school look good. You might say, oh, but I need more money to teach those kids to read and write. You don't need money to teach kids to read and write. Everybody knows that. We've been giving you levy money. We've been giving you money to get money in the budget increases, and the numbers stay the same. Oh, we need this money for class sizes, you might say. I've never seen the class sizes decrease after a levy. My kids are now in high school. They've been in these schools since kindergarten. Never seen the class sizes decrease, only increase. Plus, for Roseville schools, if you want smaller class sizes, stop open enrollment like Mountain View schools have done for many years. We have 20% of our kids come from outside of our school district, when the state average is 9%. And that's fine. Those are 2017 numbers, so it's probably even higher now. If we want smaller class sizes, stop letting all these kids into our schools. And you might get more money per student that comes in, but then you come and ask us for more money in the end. So in conclusion, instead of threatening to stop basic education that you're required to provide by law for our students, and that we taxpayers have already paid for, show us how you spend the money you already have. Show us what you did with the last levy money. Explain why class sizes haven't gotten smaller. As parents, this vote is our only voice. We sit here, it's like talking to thin air. We get these email responses back that are just these form letters, and you just feel like you're not listened to. And so you have to vote.
Thank you.
And this vote is your only voice.
Thank you very much. Next up is Rhonda. Is it Rhonda Halsey? The last name isn't identified.
I'm speaking on behalf of Alan
Yeah,
Halsey
but what is
today.
your name? And you're the speaker. So your
Yes.
name is Rhonda what?
Ron Zoomer.
What's last name?
Zoomer?
Could you spell that?
Yep, Z-E-U-M-E-R.
Thank you. And you yourself are a community member, a parent?
A parent and a community member,
Thank you.
both. And I am reading this on behalf of Alan, who can't be here tonight, but I also have interest in this as well. It's our understanding that the Roseville School District has a plan or a policy which allows students to use the restroom of their gender identity and does not require students to use the bathroom that corresponds to their biological sex. If that's incorrect, please let us know. I would like to share with the board 2 stories that are heartbreaking within the last 2 weeks. The first in Mountain County, Virginia. I'm sure many people have heard this. A 14-year-old girl was assaulted in the girls' restroom by a male student who was wearing a skirt and identified as female. And secondly, in Rhode Island, a man was arrested for possession of child pornography after he dressed as a woman and entered the woman's restroom. These are just 2 of the most recent examples of what happens when you allow males to use the girls' restroom. And there are, of course, many, many more examples across the U.S. at this time. Right now, this school board has the ability to prevent anything like that from happening, and we would urge you to think of and implement a plan that requires our students to use the bathroom that corresponds to their biological sex. This is a common sense measure, and it will ensure the safety of all of our girls when they use the restroom. Please don't wait for someone to be harmed, and we ask you to act on that now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next is Angie Byrne, who also is a parent and guardian in this group.
Good evening, Angela Byrne, Harambe parent. My child is trans, and she is currently using the bathroom that corresponds with her gender identity. And there was 2 cases nationwide where maybe we had men trying to be predators in bathrooms. Men try to be predators everywhere. How about we teach our cis boys to not be predators? My child is far more likely to be harmed out in public than girls are by some boy or man posing as a woman. Please follow state policy and MDH policy that allows children to use the restroom that matches their gender identity. It is gender affirming, and it is proven to lower depression and other mental illnesses in our LGBTQ youth. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's all the speakers we had signed up this evening, so thank you, everybody. With that, we'll move to the consent agenda. Entertain a motion, sir.
I didn't get a chance to sign up. Can I speak?
Well, we need your information, and why did you not get a chance? Were you not here in time, or?
I was told I wasn't here in time, so I don't know if I was 1 minute late or what.
Okay, then I'll ask you information. Go ahead and take the microphone.
Sure, I'm Bruce.
So can you let us know your name and the administrator, executive assistant will just record as you let us know. So what's your name, please, full name?
Bruce Ona. Bruce Ona.
How do you spell your last name, sir?
O-N-A.
Thank you. Oh, Mr. Onan, you've been here before.
Yeah.
Okay, and you are
Sorry for the
a
mask.
community member, a parent in the district. What is your role?
My child has grown up now.
So you're a
I
community member.
raised a daughter.
Excellent. So you're a
Yeah.
community member and parent of an ex-student. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Let's start the timer. Thank you. I'm sorry,
Okay.
Bruce, I didn't recognize you with the mask.
Okay, yeah, sorry I was a minute late or whatever. And thank you for allowing me to speak. Yeah, I'm really concerned about the schools that we seem to have political left-wing indoctrination going on in our schools today that we did not have decades ago. And parents are being marginalized like we're not being listened to and respected. We don't feel respected as parents. We don't feel like we're equally listened to as your left-wing special interest groups you have coming into the schools. LGBT would be one of those groups that I heard, you speaking to a leader in that, social studies teacher, and again, he marginalized parents. He said, oh, parents have to be taught about, basically the healthiness of homosexuality and of gender identity. We're the enlightened ones. And you parents, you don't know anything. You don't know how to raise kids. There are kids now. That's a communist type of approach that the kids belong to the state, to the school board, and we know better than the parents. In the old days, the parents had equal say in what was taught. And the fact is, most parents don't want boys going in girls' bathrooms and boys playing on girls' sports teams, which takes away from equality for girls' sports. And they don't want homosexuality being taught, being encouraged to the kids, which it is, behind our back. My friend, his 13-year-old son, last week was told to read a book about homosexuality to encourage him to embrace the lifestyle. Well, if you believe the Centers for Disease Control, which I don't know if you believe in them or not, but they say 1 to 2% of males are homosexual in the U.S., and they contract over 50% of the AIDS in the U.S. So why aren't you guarding our kids' health and concerned about our kids' health? And so we think that like these mandates are less than sincere when we see you don't even care about our kids' health in the sexual area and the disease spread from it. Back in a previous president, we would respect parents and we would all commonly acknowledge what are healthy lifestyles and what are not. And
Thank
we've
you,
seen
Mr.
the loss that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your explanation. With that, we will move on to the consent agenda. Entertain motion to approve the consent agenda.
So,
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Kitty. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Consent agenda passes. We did also have gifts again shared this evening, and Director Goggins is going to share this with us. Kitty.
I'd like to thank our community. We're very fortunate to have such a generous community. Central Park Elementary received from DonorsChoice.org books about social emotional learning for classroom use. Falcon Heights Elementary received from Burkle Company funds for the art department. Fairview Community Center received from Mark Anderson funds for classroom use. The Roseville Area High School received from David Schrader on behalf of Carmen and Seth Florence funds for principal's discretion. Roseville Area High School received from Bruce Cyber funds for AVID program. High school also received from the Rouse Girls Soccer Boosters funds for coaching staff and equipment. And the Roseville Area Middle School received from Frank Shaw a 3/4-size cello for the orchestra program. Thank you so much for the donations to help continue to offer the kind of programs that we're able to.
Thank you, Katie. I know it is a broken record every time, but we're just so thankful for our community support and those who choose to give to our students and our learners. With that, we'll move on to the reports and non-action items. I think first up this evening is our enrollment and demographic reports. We have a team arriving to share that with us this evening. Good evening. I don't know who's leading you off. I'll let you all introduce yourselves. Sorry, Jake.
Thank you. I'm talking into the mic tonight.
Please do pull your microphones closer to you if you can. We have had some difficulty with people understanding.
Yeah, we will make sure to do that. So, thank you for having us this evening. This report, our Enrollment and Demographic Report, provides you with an overview of our current enrollment trends for this school year, as well as the demographic trends. We used to do these as two reports, two separate reports, but because of their similarity, a number of years ago we decided to put them together into one report that provides information about our current students. We try to use data that is from the same sources each year, so our numbers in the enrollment section may look different from our numbers in the demographic section. And there is a number of us providing the information tonight. So I think we'll start off with introductions, and I'll start. I'm Jake Madeline, the Director of Student Achievement and also
Christina Robertson, English Learner Program Administrator.
And Dion Smith, Director of Equity and Outreach.
Thank you very much. Our first slide shows our strategic plan areas, and the report covers multiple areas of our strategic plan, especially two main areas, which are improved learning for our students of color, American Indian students, English learners, students receiving special education service, and pre-kindergarten learners, and to improve communication and genuine engagement with families and communities, especially with our underrepresented communities. The information tonight will support why we continue to work on these areas that I just highlighted in our strategic plan. And we do have a couple areas that I bolded to really make sure that these particular ones that I wanted to point out to you, to just continue to provide a curriculum that reflects the diverse cultures of our families and students, to continue professional development for our culturally competent teaching, and strengthen relationships between staff and students of color and American Indian students, as well as retain and recruit more staff of color and American Indian staff, and to increase access to district and school information by providing interpreters and translations in multiple languages, including Karen, Hmong, Somali, Spanish, and Nepali. And you'll see the reasons why as we go through this report for highlighting those areas in our strategic plan. The first part is our enrollment report, and I'm going to hand that off to our Assistant Superintendent, Melissa Song.
All right, thanks, Jake. Good evening. So for the next several slides, we'll be sharing information regarding our enrollment. This data comes from our enrollment office, and so it's important to know that it can be different than the data that we give to MPC, as this data is updated more frequently. Yeah, I'm running out of space here, but thank you. Look at that, my friends all down a little bit. Thank you. So what you see on this slide is our enrollment trend over time. This data has been taken from the same source, meaning we pull the data from the same data source year to year, in other words, comparing apples to apples. You'll notice a drop in students in 2019-20. This was most likely because of the continued pandemic and families looking for an in-person option. This would also be consistent with state data, meaning this was not unique to just Roseville. From 2020 to 2021, we are below where we expected to be, as some families were looking for a full distance learning option. As vaccines are rolled out for children ages 5 to 11, we are hoping and cautiously optimistic that will increase some enrollment. It's also important to note that we had very predictable trends with some growth in enrollment each year pre-COVID. Those predictions are now more difficult. We anticipate that we'll continue to experience some difficulty or instability in our predictions as we navigate COVID-19. So this next slide shows the enrollment by grade level. We are seeing a higher enrollment in secondary than elementary, and we are closed in open enrollment in grades 9, 10, and 11. This next slide here shows our K-6 enrollment over time. A reminder that the jump from 2012 was from when Harambe joined our school district. We also had a bigger drop in 2019-20 due to the pandemic, and a smaller drop between 2021. It was roughly 34 students, where the year before was roughly about 140. There's also been some decreases in our secondary enrollment, more so this year than last year. Jake and I talked about this, and it was difficult to speculate why there was a decrease. It could be related to distance learning options, but it's also really tough to say. once vaccines are offered, we could see an increase in enrollment. We'll transition now to talking a little bit about class sizes. This is a look at our average class size. The far right shows two numbers. The first number is the average class size for 21-22. The second number is the average class size for 2021. The numbers at the bottom are the district average for that grade level. Currently, all of our class sizes are within the ratios, but it's important to note that our class size ratios do fall on the higher side. So just for reference, our ratios are 20 to 22 students in kindergarten, 28 to 30 for first through third grade, and 33 through 34 in fourth through sixth grade. This slide illustrates the average class size for grades 7 and 8. The average from 2020 and the average from 2021 is pretty similar. This next slide is the average class sizes for grades 9 through 10, or 12, I'm sorry. Again, the average from 2020 to 2021 is pretty similar. This slide here typically shows Roseville class size compared to Metro XU, but their data is always a year behind, and they did not do a survey last year. This is due to the differences that so many districts had due to the pandemic and the variations in class size between in-person learning and distance learning. That said, we should have more data to compare this to next year. The same applies to middle school, and the same applies to high school as well. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Jake to talk more about demographics, but before I do, I'd like to take a moment to thank someone who worked hard behind the scenes to make this report possible. Gathering data and the information for the enrollment and demographics report is not an easy lift, so I'd like to thank Michelle Tessum for her time and some of the data collection. Yes, I think she can talk about that, as well as her diligence and organization, so thank you, Michelle, for all you did to help make this report possible this evening.
All right, and as Melissa said, we will transition into our demographic report, and this section offers a glimpse of who our students are in our Roseville area schools. The demographic report is broken into 3 sections, which are race and ethnicity, English learners, and educational benefits participation, which was formerly referred to as free and reduced price meals. Yvonne Smith will be taking the first section, Christina Robinson the second section on EO, and I'll be taking the last section. I'll pass it over to, actually not yet. There's one more slide. So just a reminder that most of our information that we present in the demographic report comes from data in the Minnesota Automated Reporting Student System, or MARS. However, we do have to pull some of the data from our compensatory revenue report and some from the Minnesota Department of Education report cards. So now I will pass it off to Delon Smith, our Director of Equity and Innovation.
All right. Thank you, Jake. As Jake explained, I'll be taking us through the ethnicity section. So, this slide gives us our breakdown by ethnicity and the different percentages of each race that we have in our district. One thing I'll point out about this is that 60% of our student population are indigenous or students of color currently in our district. The next slide gives us our enrollment by ethnicity over time. You can see from our 2007, 2008 to 2021, 22. Some of the things I'll point out in here are that decline that Melissa talked about. As you see with our white students, you see that happening. But you also notice that every other race that we have has kind of been steady over the last 2 years as far as enrollment goes. And you'll also see from 17, 18 to 18, 19, there was a dip in the other races, actually all of the races that I reported there, and that had to do with, a big chunk of that had to do with the new category of welfare ratio, which drew from all other categories. Next slide. Now this is our 20-year picture of our enrollment by ethnicity. Couple things I'll point out about that is that back in 2011 and 2012, which is that middle yellow line that you see there, that about 43% of our students were indigenous or students of color. And now we got to that bottom yellow line, you'll see that in this current school year, we're now at 60% of our students of color and indigenous students. So about a 17% increase over the last 10 years. Then you'll also, actually no, let's go to the next slide. So on this side, we have our ethnicity by building, and what I'll point out about that is if you look at like our top 5 buildings as far as indigenous and students of color, you're going to see that that's FAS, Harambe, Edgerton, Central Park, and Little Canada in that order for that. And then our highest population of students of color are, if you look at that chart, are Asian and our Black students, both at about 18%. Next slide. All right, so here's a look at our students of color by building that we currently have. Okay, yeah, how's it going? All right, so it's just a little different than what I'm looking at, but we'll run with it. Okay, so if you look at this, we've increased our student of color enrollment to our BIPOC student enrollment by 5% in the district over the last 5 years. And every school, for the most part, has increased during that time as far as the number of students of color. We actually, if you look at that, Central Park had a slight decrease in those numbers over that last 5 years. And the schools that saw the most increase over the last 5 years would be Parkview, with a 10% increase, as you see there. EBW, 7%, Falcon Heights and FAS at about 6%, and Little Canada and Edgerton at about 5% increase in their BIPOC student population. The next slide. This compares Roseville to the surrounding districts. And as you see here, if you look at the yellow line, that's us, and that puts us at about the third highest, not about, but at the third highest as far as population of indigenous and students of color behind St. Paul, North St. Paul, Inglewood, Oakdale. All right, and so I will pass it on to Christina.
Hi. Okay, so English learners, the English Learner Program has been in Roseville for many, many years, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about our enrollment now. There we go. So the EL enrollment, this is by school, and it is holding steady. Overall at the district level, we're at 15%, which is what we've been at for almost the last 5 years. And the numbers have not changed a lot at each of the school buildings. They pretty much stayed the same. And in fact, since August 15th, we've had approximately 115 new students enrolled that qualify for the English Learner Program. So we are continuing to see incoming students. The district trend, you can see here that kind of stayed steady between 13 to 17%, but really about 15% right now. We have 1,119 identified English learner students at this time, and I expect that we will be getting more throughout the year. There is conversation about Afghan refugee families coming to the area, and a lot of that depends on housing. But people know that our program is very ready and able to support any students who come in as refugees or newcomers. We have fewer level 1 and 2 students than we have had in the past, and I attribute that to the immigration kind of changes and also the pandemic. Here's just another view of the EL school trend, and actually I think that, let's see here, Central Park has gone down a little bit, and I think that might be partly due to the immigration situation. A lot of our newcomer families tended to be in that attendance area. It could also be related to housing concerns, but I talked to an EL teacher today, and 8 new students are enrolling this week that are home language other than English, so they probably will qualify for services. So we continue to get them through the year. So this is just a chart that shows of all of the 7,545 students in our district, we have 81 languages, other than English spoken at home, so about 2,467 students. So I want to make it clear that we're talking about students who may not be in EL services but have a home language other than English. So when I think of this population, I think of students who may be very proficient in more than one language and very proficient in English, but their parents may not have had that same opportunity. So it's about 36 to 37% of our families have a home language other than English. So when I think about the data that DeLong presented about 60% Indigenous and students of color, a lot of those also have home language other than English. And then out of that subset, there's 1,119 EL students who actually qualify for language services. And then top 10 languages that are spoken other than English at home. The biggest one is Spanish, and that continues to grow much more quickly than the other languages. Hmong, Somali, Nepali, Saga, and Karen are actually the same. Those two could go together, so those are kind of the top 5. And then within our English learner programming, the students' home languages are Spanish, Hmong, Somali, Karen, and Nepali, really. So those are languages we've been really actively connecting with families during the pandemic, finding different ways to inform them in their home languages, especially if they've not had the opportunity to learn to read and write in their own native language. Our cultural liaison team is fabulous, and there's a lot of outreach through Facebook, cultural pages, and things like that. And then the last page is just the home languages spoken, and you can see over time kind of how they've changed. But you can see that Spanish is the one that is the highest continuing across and continues to increase. The other ones are probably a little bit more dependent on.
What does it mean with the language that's noted in red?
Excuse me?
The language is in red, what does that mean?
Oh, those are new languages.
Oh, I see, it's there. If I learn to read better, I
Thank
do
you,
a better
Jake, for the
job.
assist.
Thank you for your trick question.
That's
Those
okay.
are
I
new
didn't actually
languages
look at
just
them.
this year.
Yeah. So we do get a lot of new languages, and we have a very good interpreter service that connects us in just about any language you want. So, yeah, and that's the EL. So, hand it up.
Thank you. I will take it from there. So the final part of our report tonight is on educational benefits participation. This is also known as students who qualify for free or reduced price meals. However, we want to acknowledge that it transfers into more areas than just meals. It provides students with support for transportation, activities, athletics, and offer fees that may be barriers, or help with the fees that may be barriers to student participation in some of our educational programs. The benefits also help to provide a more equal playing field for all students and their families. So our first slide is the overall percentage of students who qualify for educational benefits. Notable in this slide is that we can say we saw a large upward trend between 2009 and 2019, and this occurred from the Great Recession that hit our community and communities across the nation very hard. Its impacts have lasted quite some time, and we do see some recovery in the most recent years, but have yet to see the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic may have on our community in the Roseville area schools. So this slide, next one, shows our percentage of students by building that qualify for educational benefits. It provides a 3-year trend. And to note on this slide is the downward trend in most of our schools, except for Rams and Parkview. We hope that this is a positive trend for our district and not because we have less families applying for benefits. We have really made an effort in this year in our schools to have every family complete an application, as this has a significant impact on our school funding and program for students. So this slide shows our longer longitudinal trend for each of our schools over the last few years. And to note, you can see our district has steady climb and incline over these years from 2007 all the way to 22, from 33% up to 42%. So that's steady increase over time. One thing to note that I thought was interesting was really Parkview almost tripling over that same time span. And that is the end of our presentation, and we
like to point out that it's now under the category of educational benefits, and you had reference formerly called previously free and reduced price lunch. And know that this year the federal government is paying lunch and snacks and breakfast for all students regardless of qualifications. And we can make an assumption that our numbers actually are higher because the family does need to apply for educational benefits. So we work hard to identify and complete those applications because again, compensatory revenue flows through those applications.
Thank you. The payment of that for every student is related to the pandemic, obviously. Has any of us heard whether or not the federal government is going to continue that practice?
We have not heard. We just know right now it will be through this school year, through 21-22, but we have not heard about the future.
Thank you, Superintendent, for the clarification. Thank you all. With that, I'll open it up to my board colleagues for questions and comments.
Thanks. Thanks again for the report. When students or families leave the district, so kind of an enrollment question. Does central enrollment, are they keeping track of data as to why students are leaving? I understand why we had some students leave during the pandemic, but for other reasons like charter schools, they want to be homeschooled, just central enrollment, keep track of some of that? I'm curious. Well, like what's the process when a family leaves?
Yes,
Sorry, I just wanted to, I was curious.
Central enrollment does track that information. Obviously, the biggest factor right now is the pandemic and vaccinations. As a matter of fact, our enrollment looked much higher going even into late August. And we saw that change, especially again at the elementary school, coming into those early days leading up to the school year and early into the school year out of concern, again, with elementary families as far as vaccinations go. But we also do keep track outside of the pandemic, looking at trends as far as other options, whether it be charter schools, other public schools, homeschool, non-publics. And, we can certainly have a conversation if you'd like to review that at a later date. We can look at some of that trend data as well.
Thank you, Sherry. Sherry's broad responsibilities include overseeing central enrollment in Roseville schools. I'd also like to note that last year we ran an initiative to get our students back, and so we did lots of qualitative research around why families are leaving, and it was to the narrative that was described. But I think this is a nod to do that again now following first trimester, and especially as we continue to open up our schools with elementary vaccinations around the corner.
Yeah, I'll add on to that too, Jenny. That was a strategic outreach, and the intent of the design behind it was that each student or family that left during the pandemic, that they received a call from someone after school, and it was meant to be an active care and also a connection in the sense of, is there anything that we can do or any barriers that we could remove or any way that we could assist you in returning to Roseville area schools. So, and if nothing else, but it was just a positive interaction between our schools, our staff, and community members.
Thank you. Other questions? Comments? Group?
I have a question. Hi. Thank you for the report. About the EL numbers, just to remind us, kind of like somebody doesn't become an EL forever, right? So yeah, say more about that in terms of how it's counted and then when it's not counted.
Sure. So, when we talked about like the complications in like getting our numbers, one thing with English learners is that they're always changing because we're getting new students in, and just because somebody comes with a home language other than English doesn't mean they automatically go into the EL program. So we have a whole series of steps, which every family that comes to enroll their child in the school district must denote if they have a home language other than English. So, every single parent fills that out. Once a home language other than English is identified, there is a series of steps to evaluate language need, and then if a child qualifies for the EL services, then they are entered into service and they get that status in their system and they get the services. If they have a really successful supportive system and do very well. They're most likely to exit out of the EL program according to the state criteria within 5 or 6 years, probably. So we have a very good exit rate from our EL program. So that is one of the things about when we look at data for our EL students is that the pool is always changing again, right? It's a good thing that they're growing and leaving the pool, but whenever we look at their academic success or what's happening, it's students who are being evaluated in a language they are still learning. But we do see good success with students who exit the program, and that's sort of fun too.
Thank you for that clarification.
Because you talk about how you still were receiving students, and yet the numbers are the same, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of reconcile that, and that's exactly the explanation I needed. So thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Looks like we're good to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Very
you.
important presentation. Thank you. Next up, another report non-action item will be Sherry Thompson, our Director of Business Services, with the monthly financial report this evening. Welcome, Sherry. And that's your official time to share.
Now it's my official time. And thankfully, I grew up in a family of 6 and I was the youngest, so I don't need a mic.
Well,
But I will take advantage of it.
yes, I think, I'm sure the viewers will
Yes.
appreciate it.
So, again, thank you. We just wanted to give an update this month. Obviously, we do a finance update every month. The board and administration have been preparing for the operating levy for over a year. Much work has gone into that. Dr. Lake and Assistant Superintendent Melissa Sonic and I have presented all kinds of places, several places. Some things have been on our website. So we thought we'd just take this opportunity to share it. I don't believe we've actually shared it at a board meeting. So just kind of a summary of where things are at. So for our presentation, first of all, research shows that the quality of our schools impacts the quality of our community. It's our job as district leaders to do all we can to ensure our students get the kind of education they deserve and our community expects. While we do our best to live within our means, sometimes we need additional support from our community. After more than a year of planning and review, the board took action in June or July to unanimously approve placing 2 school funding questions on the ballot for November 2nd. So we want to share with the community so that they can understand these requests and make an informed decision come next week. So first, a reminder of who we are as a school district. We have a long and proud history of providing strong educational programs, a talented, caring staff, and a shared vision of excellence. We are also generous and reliable financial support from the community, which has enabled us to meet the educational needs of our students and their families. We work hard to be good stewards of our taxpayer dollars and to be financially transparent and credible. And now, the best voices of all, we have a video with some of our students and a summary of some of our funding facts.
In Roseville area schools, we have a long and proud history of providing strong educational programs, a talented, caring staff, and a shared vision of excellence. Our parents give us high marks on the return on their investment in our schools.
reiterate a couple of facts that were shared in here. The fact that we do have an annual $4 million a year gap just in this year alone between the inflationary costs and the funding that we receive from the state. We had a generous increase in June. However, it does not bring us up to speed. The gap remains. Actually, it's widened over the last 10 years. Also, our special ed programs, they're required and they're a vital part of our student programming. It costs the district nearly $10 million more each year than we receive in reimbursement. So that adds to the pressure on our budget. Due to the pandemic, the federal government has provided additional funds to our schools, for which we are grateful. However, as a group, they are one-time funds. They are not sustainable, and they are focused on pandemic relief. So they will not help with our long-term budget sustainability. It's important to understand how schools are funded in Minnesota. Our revenue comes from three main sources. The largest portion is from the state. The second largest comes from local community in the form of property taxes. And most of the remainder is from the federal government. State law allows other local governments, such as cities and counties, to increase their levies without going to the voters for approval. School district levies are either set by the state or they must be voter approved. The board does not have that authority on its own. So in Minnesota, as with most states, school districts have the ability to ask voters to support increased local funding. The vast majority, as was stated in the video, of school districts in Minnesota have voter-approved levies. The last time we asked our community to increase our operating levy was 15 years ago. So that's what's resulted in some of the budget cuts over time, or increased class sizes, because we have not increased that. So we really have done our best to live within our means, and we only go to voters when necessary. Many people aren't aware there is a legal distinction between different pots of money that the schools receive. In particular, the difference between levies and bonds. We had a bond request back in 2017, $144 million for construction on remodeling our facilities, and the community supported that request, and we are so grateful for that. It enabled us to make building improvements all across the district. And I'm pleased to report that our bond projects were not only on time, they were within budget. But bond funds can only be spent on construction for building-related expenses. Operating levies are for learning. So that helps the support. The levy helps to support classroom instruction, teachers, and other school operating costs. So a couple of more points here. Our current levy, our current voter-approved levy, is a critical source of funding. It's $8 million annually. That will expire on June 30th of 2022, the end of this school year, if it's not approved on November 2nd. We also know that if we only renew the levy but don't get more revenue, we will continue the cycle of cuts, and our class sizes will continue to increase. We are on the larger size of our neighboring districts as far as class sizes go. So based on everything that I just shared with you, obviously the board did take action this summer, unanimously approved 2 ballot questions. Question 1 would increase our existing levy, and question 2 would increase that. So question 1 is a renewal, question 2 is an increase. Question 2 is contingent on question 1, which means question 1 must pass before question 2 can be approved. It's important to note that the levy amount per student, which is actually listed on the ballot, is not the amount each homeowner would be taxed. That's spread across the entire tax base. The amount listed on the ballot is the amount per student, the increase, and and that's $905 per student. The impact of that $905 increase is a net monthly cost or impact of about $22 on a median value home in our district, which is about $281,000. So question one, if it passes or fails, it's important to understand the consequences of success or failure of both questions. As shown here, passage of question one would help lessen major cuts, but we would not be able to address any of our critical needs. And in fact, the ongoing cycle of cuts would still be needed. If question one fails, we would face significant cuts in the 22-23 school year, and it would take quite a hit on our financial stability. Question two, if it passes, if question two also passes, we would have funds available to address some critical needs, such as our class sizes, our various student supports, and academic programs. These are areas our community has identified in surveys done earlier this year and what we're hearing from our families. It would also strengthen our financial stability. Question two, if it fails, this slide outlines what will take place if question two fails and no additional revenue is provided. There would be staff and program cuts in a range of areas. We would have to increase fees, and our financial health would suffer as we would continue to make budget cuts. So in summary, we have two ballot requests. One to renew the existing levy, and a second to increase that levy. Question two, again, is contingent on question one, so can only pass if voters first approve question one. If both questions are approved, we would be able to support and enhance students' classroom experiences and provide more financial stability for our school district. Again, the items listed here were all identified as priorities by our community. And if either or both requests fail, we will have continued cuts and not be able to address these priorities. This would not go away. We would be back at this immediately following. So we'll open it up for questions. Here is our website, www.isd623.org/levy2021. There's more information out on that website. And again, this is on the ballot for November 2nd.
Thank you, Sherry. Superintendent, would you like anything to add or clarify?
Thank you, Sherry. Sherry, in your expertise, what's the impact of open enrollment students in our district, the percentage and the additional revenue that flows with those students?
So our open enrollment is about 24% of our total enrollment. That is probably about it's actually about $25 million when we look at that. So that really offers a lot of our programs. Again, it's 25%. So it's a large number. It doesn't limit our programs. Our facilities are what limits our class sizes, right? Our physical capacity in our facilities is what limits it. The additional revenue of students coming in actually provides more benefit to our existing students because we benefit from the additional revenue. So we're able to offer, for instance, at the high school, it allows us to offer more class offerings. So it is.
In case people don't realize it, that's what some term backpack money, right? Like
that's what I always have referred to as
like
backpack
money. It follows those students with them when they enroll at yours.
We receive the same per funding on a non-resident student, per pupil funding, as we do a resident student. We don't receive less, we don't receive more.
Thank you. Any other questions? Good.
Could I add a clarification there, if I understand correctly? Open enrollment We only accept students if there are spaces in the classes available. So what it allows us to do is then fully fund that building to be able to provide all the resources and programs that we'd like to be able to offer in that program. So we don't have to accept the students if we don't have space.
That is correct. That is correct. And that's typically, there are rules around that, as a matter of fact, that the state has as far as limiting open enrollment, and it needs to be exactly based on that, is not having space.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, about open enrollment, I was just wondering, have we done any, do we know what is the demographics of those who are coming to Roseville? Is there a difference, or they integrate pretty well with our own student population? Just curious, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like just curious who they are.
So I could report, I mean, we have the data by district, I don't know it off the top of my head. But currently, we have, looking at our resident students, we have a combined total of about 1,200 students that opt out of our district, that opt for either another school district through open enrollment. They may go to another district, or they may go to a charter school. Again, it's about 1,200 total. We bring in over 1,700 students through open enrollment that choose Roseville. And they come from traveling different miles also. I mean, of course, we're contiguous with St. Paul and Minneapolis, but we're not limited to St. Paul and Minneapolis. They come from all over the metro.
I'll add, in terms of student demographic, open enrollment this review ran that report, and it matches our resident students. Same demographic.
Yeah.
I'd just like to make one additional comment to what we've got out here, and that is today we do have in-person voting. It's open at the Ramsey County Public Library, so anybody can vote in the next week at the library, or of course on Tuesday in their regular polling place.
Great, because the library is valid for every precinct, no matter where you live, right?
That is
You can
correct.
go to the Roseville Library, even if that's not your normal polling place.
And I can attest that it's very quick. They have quite a few people set up there and voting election judges, and so it's a fairly efficient process.
Thank you. Other questions? Curtis?
Less a question and more of a statement, I guess. Thank you for your explanation of how our district is funded. As a school board member, we have that information, and you've explained this to us a number of times, but it's easy to forget that everyone understands that. And frankly, I think you did a really good job of just laying out where our funding comes from. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Yeah, maybe I could ask the final one, because I've asked it, is that what was the tax, the property tax implication from the last ask as compared to this ask?
So back in 2017, when we passed, when the board passed the $144 million bond referendum, and at the same time adopted the long-term facility maintenance program that invests about $12 million a year for deferred maintenance. At that time, the monthly impact was about $39 a month. And at that time, the median value home was about $250,000. So now it's like $281,000. But yes, that was the net impact, was about $39 a month.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? Sherry, once again, thank you very much for your diligence and your detailed information for us tonight. Thank you.
Thanks.
With that, we'll move into our action items, and I believe we only have one. It's the second reading potential approval of our amendments to our policy 209 with our operating procedures. So I know that as part of the board packet, we got the red lines. I don't know if you wanted to, we're here to share it. So I don't know if anybody has a question or if we need to go through this. If
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. Thank you. Next item is the study session report, and I must admit, I forgot who's going to be sharing that with us this evening. Curtis. Thank you.
Yes, we had a record length study session, in that it was really quite short. The Director of Student Achievement, Jake Vondelindy, presented to us a new course, AP, Advanced Placement Spanish Language and Culture. This is, the idea was that this was going to replace an existing course that we could no longer offer. So, really, that's about it.
Thank you. Yes, it was
Yeah.
a single topic study
I
session.
think single topic, it all made sense, so, thanks, Jake.
Thank you, Curtis. With that, we'll move into our board reports. If any of us have things that they'd like to share, or we want to jump in first, if you have anything. Kitty, go ahead.
I think just about everybody was at the local elected officials meeting last week. That is always a wonderful opportunity. We get to hear what other divisions of government are doing that are relevant to what we're doing, and they get to hear what we're doing. So it's a marvelous exchange of information. It was really valuable as always. We got to get through Vetu Techa, is where we held the meeting and had a tour afterwards. And that is just such an impressive facility. It's always a joy to get another opportunity to see it. Would like to thank Jamie Becker-Finn and Curtis Johnson for organizing a lovely vigil, which we as community members could attend last Monday night for the passing of our beloved principal, Brian Coland. That was a lovely event to allow the community to express feelings and start the healing process. The Roadmap to Return Committee, which is our district-wide COVID committee that has various staff, board members, and parents, others. Unfortunately, some of the parents are actually medical doctors, so we have a wonderful perspective there as well. We had a meeting this week. We're meeting roughly every 2 weeks now, not every week like last year, because things aren't developing or changing quite as quickly. But it was very encouraging to hear that the numbers in the county are going slightly downward, and also in the district, although the district, or the zip codes of the district, which is how it's reported, are still somewhat higher than the county overall. I got an opportunity to meet with my student. I'm an avid mentor this year. I've never been an avid mentor before, so it's quite a treat. And in terms of meeting, we're going to be meeting weekly, and that connection and getting over to the middle school on a regular basis is going to be a real treat for me. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Rose or Curtis, anything from you?
Okay, sure. Let's see. Okay, we'll start with, had an opportunity to attend our first American Indian parent group meeting of the year. That was awesome. Along with Delon Smith, Gabriella was our American Indian coordinator, who is our American Indian cultural liaison. And it was really well attended. I was just so happy. And it was a great opportunity to just reconnect with everyone in person after 2 years. So looking forward to more of those meetings and finding ways that we can help our American Indian students. Let's see, Kitty, I already addressed the local elected officials meeting. Always a pleasure. I'll just take the opportunity to thank Dr. Lake for continuing those got to attend and volunteer. The Fire Bears hosted their first in-person Minnesota Invitational in 2 years. So if you don't know who the Fire Bears are Roseville Area High School's first robotics league, and they're really very good. They're really talented, and they are led by a very passionate teacher. So just an insane amount of fun, and so first time I actually got to volunteer for about it was supposed to be 2 hours, and I kind of got into close to 4. But just insane amount of fun watching robots trying to shoot basketballs into a really tiny hole. So, and then got to attend a couple of football games, in particular senior night at Roseville Area High School. The football team has had their last game of the year, and so they have at least one more game this week. So they have fought hard all year, and so my hat's off to them. That leads me to certainly not least, attended the vigil for Brian Coleman. I'd like to personally thank the community team that helped, that was just invaluable in helping me put this thing together in a very short period of time. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank some of our volunteers from Roseville Area School Foundation, some of our speakers from Survivor Resources, NAMI, Northeast Youth and Family Services, and an excellent floral boutique for the flowers. So I think that's all I have.
Thank you. Rose, anything to share?
I think I will echo how moving that virgil was. So thank you so much. It's really nice to see so many people out. And just sea of people, right? Sea of people out there, and so really honoring a life that impacted so many in our community. So thank you so much for all that. I would say I also, for the first time today, met my avid mentee, because last year was all like phone call, and that first time today I met him, and so I'm hoping to also use the rated time. He's in high school, and I have to say he's loving the rated time because it gives him a lot of choices, and we are trying to coordinate kind of when I can go see him more. So it's a great program. It's so great to see him blossom because the pandemic was really hard. He is one of those students where distant learning just did not work for him, and now in person, he sounds different. He's just a different person. So there is something about the in-person learning that works for many of our students. So, and I also attended. It was a very interesting workshop by Minnesota School Board Association on the evaluation of superintendents, and it was really interesting because it's to really think about, how do we do that in a way that is about growth, it's about collaboration, and making sure that we are not kind of saying that, asking the superintendent, especially during the pandemic, to meet all of the goals, but be realistic. So I thought that was a very good discussion about that, and really take it to heart about the role of as a board, right, to work with our superintendent. We have a great one here to think about what does that mean to evaluate our superintendent. Ultimately, it's about our students in our community. So yeah, that was very interesting. So that's all.
Thank you. I don't really have anything to add. Again, I echo the sentiments around the vigil for Brian Coleman. Maybe one thing, AVID, for those who don't know, AVID stands for Achievement via Individual Determination, I believe, and it's a program that is really in line, for those who don't know, with our equity vision in particular. But it's really geared towards helping kids whose parents themselves don't have a history of college attendance. So it's for kids who may be the first in their generation to qualify to that, I think we'll move to our superintendent's report. Superintendent Levy.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start this evening's report by congratulating this year's Roseville Area Schools Raider Athletics Hall of Fame inductees. I'm choosing to highlight this group as they are so much more than past athletes who have climbed to the top of their respective sports. The following individuals represent prestigious student athletes, first-class coaches, community members, and active parents currently in our district. I'd also like to thank this group for continuing to be incredible role models in and around Roseville area schools. Please join me in congratulating Amy Began, Winnie Brote, Mark Devine, Marty Surdich, Bo Smith, and Mark Sodavere. Quite a class this year. Next, I'd like to once again thank our community for voting to pass our school bond referendum in 2017. These monies allowed for us to improve our existing facilities, and those improvements were felt at sites across the district. As we've previously shared, bonds are for buildings and levies are for learning. Come November 2nd, we are seeking a critical renewal and increase to our existing levy. We're asking our community to come together in support of this referendum in order to lower K-12 class size, provide additional mental health supports, and expand career and college readiness programs. Our students and families deserve the very best experience that Roseville area schools can provide. Finally, as we continue our daily commitment in returning to better this school year, as superintendent, I welcome all community feedback in regard to all programming and services that our district offers. We will only meet our excellence in equity in all we do vision through a significant and collaborative relationship with our community and parents. Please don't hesitate to contact me at all times with all of your feedback. Thank you, and as Kitty said, don't forget to vote on or before November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. With that, having concluded our business this evening, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.